Doug, it is good to see you this week. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, and thank you for this great opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were catching up for a couple minutes before we kicked this thing off live. I was telling you I'm cold, but where you're at up in Canada, it sounds like it probably much colder than where I'm at in Tennessee.
Yeah, we're probably running about minus 25 Celsius.
I don't even know what that would feel like.
I've quit trying to figure it out. I just know it's cold
Yeah, just stay in and stay warm, right?
as much as you can. Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, Doug, it's an honor and a pleasure to talk with you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation because personally, I've never met or spoken to anyone who does what you do, as far as mentorship, talking about grieving, and as I was learning about you, it sounds like some unfortunate situations kind of led to maybe what the route you've gone in life, but tell me and tell us your story of just your background, just your life and where it's led to the work that you do now.
Well, I'm a Saskatchewan farm boy, so I was born and raised on the farm, and I ended up shortly after graduating from high school. I ended up joining the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So I did a tour of duty of about 25 years, and some of which resulted in some fairly traumatic situations and post-traumatic stress that I ended up with. Certainly didn't bargain for it, but ended up with it. And so I ended up having to deal with that. I've probably got 30 to 40 years of leadership and management experience. And so I retired from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and ended up getting into some leadership and management positions where I helped others grow their career. And then as time went on, I ended up uh, job coaching or helping university college students go through resume building, cover letter, interview prep, and all that. And we had some great successes. And as a result of those successes, a number of them said, you should do this for a living. We can't afford to pay you, but I'm sure somebody can. And so I did some research and I found that there was a niche that I could fill that dealt with mentoring, but more importantly, it was a niche that dealt with the certification of mentors, something that existed for the coaching side of the business world, but definitely not for the mentoring side. So I partnered with a company in the United States to create a certification process. And then as time went on, we kind of went our separate ways where they were providing a knowledge-based certification, and my audience was such that it was starting to now, I was feeding them all this good stuff. They all of a sudden now said, okay, that's great. We want to be certified based on competence. And so we had to rejig the certification process. I ended up partnering with somebody in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, kind of moved on with that. And then we've evolved even further now where I'm involved quite heavily in the grief mentoring area and dealing with a lot of that. And
Question for you, Doug.
sure.
The difference What's the difference between mentoring and coaching? Because like you said, there's a lot of certifications for coaching and who do a lot, but like I said, you're the first person I've met from the mentoring side. What's the primary difference between those two in your space?
I kind of was wondering, are we going to go there or not? That's a good question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. And for me, the difference is where I spend a lot of time on the definition that I use for mentoring is it's a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and mentee are going to learn and grow together. So you're dealing a lot with the personal growth side of things.
Yeah.
before you even look at the career development or anything like that.
Mm.
And it's gotten more evolved because now we introduce the grief aspect of it, which is on the growth side.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Coaching kind of more one way, you're teaching something, the mentorship. I see what you're saying there. There's two
So,
sides to it. Yeah, it balances out. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah, and there's all kinds of different definitions. One where they say mentoring is developmental, coaching is more. A good example that I've used in the past has been I got brought into an organization where they were looking at terminating an employee, and they tried coaching, they tried all kinds of different modalities to try and do a behavioral change, and they brought me in, and within 5 sessions, 5 1-hour sessions, we had a behavior change, and this employee became sort of one of their rising stars as a result of the process that I took him through to sort of find out, okay, what's the root cause? How are we going to deal with this?
Yeah. Such a different approach. It sounds, hearing you explain it, I mean, it sounds like, I don't know, a no-brainer for some, to go that route.
Yeah.
But you just don't,
Yeah.
like I said, I've never seen this. I've never seen anyone or met anyone that does the work you do. So maybe that's a good thing. You've got a lot of work that you'll be able to do because there's not a lot of people out there, I guess, doing that.
And you're absolutely correct. That's one thing that I get for feedback for myself is that, don't stop doing what you're doing because the world as
Needs
we
it.
know it today definitely needs it. And there is a gap that you need to fill. And I've had people, sort of suggest, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but where's the next Doug going to come from?
Yeah.
So, we've got that gap that we have to take a look at and fill as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got a lot to do, Doug. But, well, no, well, kind of taking that into your book, Grief, the Silent Pandemic, talk about what led to you writing this and putting this out there for others to read.
I think the biggest, how would I word this? The main reason for writing the book was sort of following on the heels of You Are Not Alone, which was my second book. And maybe I'll go there first. You Are Not Alone, excuse me, is very much focused on post-traumatic stress, mental health, and tying mentoring into that is that if you have a mentor who is a good listener, and that's the key is, the ability to communicate, but more importantly, to be that active listener. So listening and actually hearing. If you can find somebody like that, that's absolutely phenomenal. And that's just going to help you. But in You Are Not Alone, we talk a bit about the grief journey that you can end up going on. I share a story in there of to sort of explain my post-traumatic stress and my experience with trauma, where I was dealing with an individual that basically it was death by suicide. And so I share with the reader what that was like and the things we went through and the steps that we went through and all of those things and how, it was part of the journey was giving my wife to be, because we were at that stage, I believe we were engaged to get married, but it was to give her some experience or exposure to what life is as a spouse of a police officer, what that was going to be like. And, the trauma that if she wants to be actively involved in my job, the trauma that she would go through is something that, we would definitely have to have a conversation about how are we going to deal and manage with that. But so that was kind of the setting the stage for You Are Not Alone. And then going to the next book, one thing that I found in doing my research was there was lots of grief going on out there, but nobody was really doing much about it, or if they did, it was minimal. And I had personal experience with grief in that my wife Deborah passed away from cancer in 2021, And so I was dealing with all of that on top of PTSD and everything else that was being thrown at me. And that was sort of the motivator for writing the book, because I felt that there was a need for telling more of the story and providing the tools that
Yeah.
people need to go on that healing journey. So that's, for the most part, that's where it all came from.
Yeah. Have you personally, you've mentored so many people. Have you in your life, have you had mentors and coaching along the way through these stages that you've had to go through? Was that something that you've, I guess, leaned on somebody else for? And did you have someone else kind of encourage you to write this book, or was it more of an internal responsibility that you felt because you've experienced these things, you have the ability to help others? So it was more of your own I guess, journey to decide to write the book.
It was a combination of the two. I think would be fair to say that I knew, based on the conversations and stuff, like, you go to the bank to do some banking, and the person standing next to you is, you don't know who they are, but they're talking to the bank teller and they're saying, "Oh yeah, yeah, John had cancer. John passed away just last week, and you know, it's hard on the family and all that sort of stuff." And I'm thinking, I have to be able to do something to make this better. I can't fix it. That's not what I'm here. That's not what I'm on this earth to do, is to fix things. I'm here to provide the guidance that people need in order to, navigate through the grief and stuff that they're dealing with. That's my purpose. That's my calling, is to be able to do that. And that was part of the reason for writing Grief. The other part was, it was in memory of my wife. She was kind of the driving force that kept me going. And, I kept trying to, I, I'd fall off the tracks. I could just see her standing there saying, get up,
Yeah.
get back on the horse and get going,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was because of that, we were able to do what I was able to do.
Yeah. Well, she sounds like an incredible woman, and it's amazing when you have a strong wife. I'm blessed to have one where she keeps me on my toes and challenges me to be my best every day too. So I know exactly what you're saying there, and can appreciate that for sure. But Doug, I like where you talk about how everyone has different ways of grieving, and that's something I've had to learn a lot about because I personally haven't dealt a lot with it, but learning how to be sympathetic to what people are going through and understand just how strong the mind can be in certain situations. And then, what happens to people work through that in different ways and take different paths to get to a happier place when you go through that. But it's I don't know if inspiring or just it may be important. It's important that you wrote this book, and it's important that you're doing what you're doing because, like you said, there's so many people out there that deal with this every single day, but you don't see anything out there to help. It's kind of just like, hey, you'll get better. It'll, time heals everything, just one day at a time. So it's just kind of the simple little things that people say, and people check in a little bit, but then everyone's lives moving so fast, so you can't always have someone there to talk to. But it's just, I don't know. I guess talk a little bit about some of the stuff you write that helps people get through those stages of life.
The one point I wanted to mention was, you were talking about, the people trying to figure out how they were going to deal with stuff. And the old school thought was, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah,
And, what I always tell people is, it's okay to come out of the closet and reach out and ask for help.
yeah,
If you can do that, that's starting us in the right direction to be able to continue your healing journey, but more importantly, to kind of shore up the sides of it
yeah,
so that, if you do stumble and fall, you can catch yourself and sort of say, okay, I've got to be mindful of that. The biggest, most important thing that anyone can do is, if you haven't experienced grief is to just listen and hear. That's, but if you have experienced grief, it's not your place to tell everyone else, this is what I did, so therefore you go and do it the way I did and everything will be fine. No, it won't, because we all grieve in our own special way to be able to deal with that. We all have coping skills that we need to use to help us get through that healing journey. And those coping skills may be skills that we can share, but we can't tell somebody this is what I did and therefore go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's extremely important to say because while everyone wants to help, it's always good intentions, for the most part, when people try to say what they did or what you should do. It always comes from a good place in the heart. But like you said, it's always good to remember that you're not them and you're not going through what they're going through or feeling the way they're feeling. So just to remember to listen and be there is more important than providing what you think someone should do, unless they ask for it. That's different if they ask for your opinion and help. But I think that's an important thing to say because, yeah, we all want to try and help, but sometimes that's not the best route to go.
We're fixers by nature. We just want to fix the problem, but you're absolutely right on the mark is that, you have to take that step back and let the conversation flow as it does. I was doing some networking and I ended up getting connected to a chap down in I can't remember, southern part of the US, and he'd lost his son 12 years ago and he's still grieving. So you can't throw a switch. It doesn't happen overnight. And the big thing to remember is that, you need those coping skills to be able to deal with it. And it's all right to share those, but it's not all right to prescribe or dictate that, these are the things you need to do if you want to get to where I am today. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What were some of the challenges you had with writing these books? Because again, you experienced a lot of this. What were some of the, I guess, some of the hard times you had to push through when trying to complete this work? I'm sure there was the fact of knowing you're going to be able to help others kind of be a motivating driver, but what were some of your personal challenges as you put this all together?
A couple things. I think the first was just the whole being motivated to write. I kind of hit what, a lot of writers hit where they hit the wall and they can't go any further. And I had to shut it down and I took a bit of a break and I went away and secluded myself where I didn't have to worry about any of that sort of stuff. So I definitely, I did that. And the other part is going through, I found that every time I had to revisit, if I was editing or doing something like that, every time I had to revisit certain sections in the manuscript, it was tough. It
Yeah,
was really, really tough. Like I talked about the day Deborah's family doctor said, "You're not doing well here. You need to go to emerge." So we went to emergency and ended up, she was diagnosed that night with cancer. I knew, and I write this in the book, I knew at that very moment that I was going to lose my Deborah. Cancer was going to win. And I knew that. I always, every time I had to go back and revisit that particular, because that was one of the key sections in the book, and every time I had to go back to revisit that, it was gut-wrenching.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's understandable. I mean, again, I can't imagine what that,
Yeah,
what going through that is like. And for you to be able to share the experience and the story to help others who may be going through similar things it's just that's incredible, Doug. It's
thank you.
incredible and very, very kind of you to do that, to be vulnerable and share that, knowing that someone else maybe can who's struggling, going through that process and maybe reading what you've written can help them get through it and a little bit easier. So yeah, yeah. I mean, all I can say is thank you, Doug, for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I found that what I do now to keep me going is that every time I get the chance to, as call it, tell Deborah's story, that becomes therapeutic for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Well, she sounds amazing too, like I said, so I'm sure it's, it's nice to hear you share the story because
Yeah.
she sounds like an incredible woman and, again, just incredible all around. But Doug, you've written a few books now. Were you always, just throughout your lifetime, have you always been a reader and a writer? Did you ever think you would did you ever think you'd write a book at all, you know? I mean, maybe something different, maybe a long time ago, maybe that was a thought. Did you ever think you'd write a book or publish anywhere?
No, I didn't. Short answer, but, I look back as a young infant growing up, the Hardy Boys
Yeah,
were, I read them cover to cover, book to book, and then as time went on, I've kind of enhanced or grown my reading capabilities where now some of my favorite books are Ken Blanchard's leadership books that because he puts he's kind of like what I see myself is he attaches a story to the book and
yeah,
it just draws you right in like he does Gung Ho, Raving Fans. There's a 1 Minute Manager. There's a number of different ones. And the part that grabs my attention and holds it is that he weaves it into a story so that you're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen next in the whole story. So, but I wasn't being on the farm. I'd take one of the Hardy Boy books to bed at night and read that and then go to sleep and get up the next morning and get back to work. That's when my dad would probably, I could hear him, suck it up, buttercup, and get back out there and do your work.
yeah,
So it was not something that I did a lot of back then, other than, obviously the Hardy Boy books, but
yeah,
and then I evolved to a little bit more reading where I looked at, once I retired from the RCMP and I started to get into some more into in-depth leadership research and writing blog articles and stuff like that. And I would focus on mentoring, leadership, and mental health to sort of seem to be just something that piqued my curiosity more than anything else.
yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, this leads into my last question for you, Doug. And I always ask everyone that comes on this podcast this exact question. But what is a book or two that has had a positive impact on you personally or professionally? And if someone asks you for a good book recommendation, what do you like to recommend to others?
I think that the one that stands out the most is Ken Blanchard's Gung Ho.
Okay. I
That's
thought you might say that one.
Yeah, yeah, that's my favorite. I remember I think I took it with me to Mexico on a holiday, and I never left my deck chair until I was done the book.
That's a good book then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll have to. I haven't read it. I'm familiar, but I have not read it. But I will add it to my list of books I need to read because if you go on vacation and you don't want to leave your chair before you're done reading, that must mean it's a good book and probably something I should read as well.
Once it gets your attention, it'll hang on to it for sure.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'll look forward to reading that. But Doug, it's like I said, it's been a pleasure to talk with you about this because it's something that like I said, I haven't personally experienced. I've never met anyone who does the work that you do or has written a book like you have, books that are around grieving and post traumatic stress and experiences. And so I think this conversation will have an impact on somebody who listens to this or who watches this. And so, and again, that's why these conversations are important because there's somebody that's going to take something from this in a good way. And so, Doug, just keep doing what you're doing. And it sounds like you've got to figure out some way to train up some more Dougs out there in the world who can run and take some of this work on with you.
Yeah, I gotta clone somebody.
Yeah, yeah, you got to figure that. You got to add that to your to-do list.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, Doug, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Absolutely.